Welcome to Proud Veteran Outreach, our weekly TV show where we ask you, the citizen patriot, to help us identify the lost or isolated vet that is having transition problems going from military life to civilian life. And consequently, when the environment is changed, it may lead to some mental health problems. And so today we're talking about mental health, and with our guest presenter Chris Shaw from Heart and Mind Connection.
Hi,
Chris,
Jim.
thank you
Nice
again
to see you
for
again.
coming to see us.
Sure.
We want to talk about homelessness and the mental illness or the mindset that homeless people are going through. I heard a statistic, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I heard that 40% of all of the homeless people out there have some kind of mental illness. So can you give us an idea of what are the circumstances around mental health and mental illness with homeless people?
Sure. I think that statistic that you quoted there is probably even a little underserved. I think we can understand if anybody's seen homeless people and maybe noticed some erratic behavior. What we're talking about is people who are suffering from a really severe illness that can impair their ability in decision making, in structuring their life to be able to take care of their regular activities, to work or attend school, or be able to have productive relationships. And that can drive a lot of people, men and women, out of a housing situation. We're also faced with a really tight housing market right now, especially in the Twin Cities, that has pushed a lot of people who might not have ever considered being in a position of homelessness out of the possibility of being able to rent or buy proper housing.
So it also could also be directly related to the fact that healthcare costs are not available to everyone. So people that are, middle income or lower, that can't afford all of the healthcare needs that they have, may be suffering from those problems. I saw one time a documentary that a man had a family and had some mental depression problems and couldn't cope with it anymore, so he said goodbye to his family and went homeless.
I think a really important thing to understand when we talk about that and the ability to get care is oftentimes that care and that support is there, but because of the symptoms of our mental illnesses, and I self-identify as having lived experience with my own PTSD, bipolar disorder, and anxiety disorder, and we know on average someone who's developed a mental health issue can wait up to 10 years before they are at a place where they're comfortable reaching out for treatment or support. And in that time, you talk about financial struggles, relationship struggles that can put somebody in an isolated position who wants to just withdraw and end up on the streets.
Another statistic that is very alarming is single moms. There's a lot of high percentage of homeless people out there are single moms.
Yeah, I think we saw last year with the encampment, the homeless encampment that was over off of Highway 55 there, that homelessness, much like mental illness, I think we have to stop thinking about it as it's a certain race or gender or situation, and anyone can end up in that situation to be out of proper housing. And the realism that a lot of women who might have faced trauma and that are parents are escaping that trauma and not knowing necessarily where to turn, and just need to get out of maybe a bad relationship or an unproductive recovery setting, maybe if they're dealing with a substance use disorder or a mental illness.
So through your Heart and Mind Connection, I know you do a lot of things, but is there something, some kind of program that you have that might help people get a positive mental attitude towards homeless people? Because most of us, we look at them and we say, hey, why don't you get a job? Or, gee, you're probably making money, collecting money off the curb. So we have a bad attitude towards homeless people? How do we get the general public to turn that around?
Well, when we refer to, as you did, the prevalence of mental illness amongst homeless people, I think what we have to do is first recognize what those people who might end up homeless are dealing with inside their own head. And that's really hard to know if you've never had a family member or never dealt with that yourself, just how debilitating a mental illness can be and really render you unable to do even simple things that other people would say, well, why can't you just hold a job?
Yeah, and it's terrible. So let's talk a little bit about military vets and homelessness.
Sure.
We put a little link on the show there for the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans. Big problem. You have some statistics about veterans that you were reading there. 1 out of
sure.
3 men, I think you said, that are homeless are veterans.
Right. 1 out of 3 men who are homeless are veterans. And the other part of that is 60% of homeless veterans are minorities. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that kind of dual issue that minorities are dealing with. There's already feeling stigmatized or discriminated against. And then to be in a situation where a mental illness, especially returning from combat or even any deployment, might render them in a situation where they're not able to handle some of their regular activities, and just how stigmatizing it can be to be a veteran and say, you know what, no, I got this. This is my deal. And we put that on ourselves as veterans. And I'm really proud of the governor for stepping up and calling Minnesota one of the states that is going to end veteran homelessness. I think the last number I heard, there were close to 2,000 homeless veterans that were identified. That number is down to now, I think, 266. So
Wow.
I believe that when he talks about ending it by 2020, that they're going to figure out a situation. But there are only a few states.
So you
doing
and
that.
I are working on creating outreach where the public and military veterans can share information by going to the YMCA's and creating outreach there. We're working on making the Legion posts, American Legions and VFWs, more educated and aware so that the public feels more comfortable with that. So I'm glad that we can count on you to lead us into understanding mental illness with homeless people.
I think it's the awareness that we need to have, Jim. Create some green zones for our veterans.
Thanks for coming in and
You bet,
educating
anytime,
us.
Jim.
All right.